In this video, we'll be going over IRS Notice CP161. This is a notice that you might receive from the IRS if you have unpaid taxes for a certain tax period. So from all appearances, it looks very similar to IRS Notice CP160, which we covered the other day. It basically goes over the same tax form, in this case IRS form 941, and I couldn't really find much information online about the difference between these two notices. But when I did compare them side by side, I noted a couple of things that I thought would be worth pointing out during this video. So here we go. Let's go ahead and start with the upper right hand corner. You'll see the notice CP161 at the very top, followed by the tax period. So IRS form 941, if you remember, is a quarterly tax return for employers. So in this case, this particular notice was focused on the fourth quarter. I believe it was dated for the end date is December 31st of 2017. So there's the notice date. I always encourage people to pay attention to the notice date, because if there's any action required, in this case, the action required is paying your tax bill or contacting the IRS about your tax bill, there's usually a timeline that's attached to the notice date. For example, if you want to object in writing, in most cases you have up to 60 days to do that. If a lot of notices may contain something to the effect of if you don't pay within 3 weeks of the notice date, then we will have to adjust your penalties and interest. So pay particular attention to the notice date so that you can understand, what your timeline will look like based on the response that you plan for the IRS. Below that is the employer ID number, followed by a contact number that you can call the IRS. A caller ID number, if you need to, you can identify yourself so that the representative can better understand your unique situation. On the left-hand side is the name and the address of the taxpayer in question. So in this case, it's ABC XYZ Company, 22 Boulder Street in Hanson, Connecticut. Pay particular attention to the address, especially if you've recently changed it. You can update your tax or your tax address in your tax record by filing your tax return. But if you're in between tax returns, or if you've recently changed and there's a reason you're expecting more correspondence, like you owe $97,000 to the IRS, then you should make sure that your address is up to date. So if you're going to call the representative, you can probably verify your identity, change your address over the phone, or you can file the change of address notice, either IRS form 8822 for individuals. In this case, it's a business related tax return, so you would file IRS form 8822-B. That's the change of address form for a business. So with those two items out of the way, and the reason you want to keep your address up to date is so that you give yourself as much time based on the notice date to take the action that you want. So, if your notice gets caught up in the mail for 2 to 3 weeks, the IRS does not care. They're going to proceed along the lines of the notice until you communicate with them and then trigger the next, action period. So you do need to pay attention to the notice date, even if you got your notice 2 to 3 weeks later than you were supposed to because of a change in address. So let's take a closer look at this. So there's the tax form. Basically, you have unpaid taxes. So this is broken down into the tax that you owed, followed by the tax payments that you made. So that was $90,000. The rest of this is either penalties or accrued interest. So, this is not realistic. I don't think that $7,000 of interest would have accrued over an 8-day period. but this is just to kind of illustrate how the IRS does calculate it. So if you want to avoid any, additional penalties or interest, then you must pay the unpaid tax by January 18th. And again, that looks to be 10 days after the notice date. And then the full balance with the penalties and interest by January 29th, which happens to be exactly 3 weeks after the notice date. At the bottom is a payment voucher, so you can use this if you're going to make out a check or a money order to the United States Treasury. If you do that, write your employer ID number, the tax period, and the form number. So in this case, it's a quarterly return, IRS Form 941. Make sure that you write the tax period. So that would be December 31st, 2017. In this case, not just 2017. So also make sure that you address your check or money order to this address. Sometimes it will be the same as up here in the letterhead, but I have seen more times than not that this is actually a different address. Sometimes the correspondence is sent from one IRS location with the expectation that you're going to send the payment to a different location. So pay particular attention to that. So on the next page, it goes into more detail about what you need to do. You can use the electronic federal tax payment system, EFTPS, to pay instead of, you can go online basically instead of sending a check or a money order. If you can't pay the full amount as prescribed, you should call so you can talk about your options. For example, you can submit an installment agreement request either online or by filing IRS Form 9465. And just as a side note, any forms that are mentioned here, we'll put resources in the show notes to links to resources, so articles and videos that we've written if you need to dig down deeper into a particular form. So if the IRS doesn't hear from you, they're just going to assume that you agree with the assessment, and they're going to continue charging that failure to deposit penalty. So the rest of this should be a summary of tax payments that were credited to your account. You can compare this to your transcript. The easiest way is to pull it up online, but you can also request a copy of your tax transcript by filing IRS Form 4506-T. That's the request for your tax transcript. I don't recommend that you wait for your tax transcript to come in because it could take more time than what you have according to the notice to get your transcript and then read it, digest it, and take the appropriate action. So if you can do that online, you should. You can't, we'll put a link in the show notes to IRS Form 4506-T, but I highly recommend that you don't wait around for that transcript to come in before you take action. So at the bottom, there's an additional contact information. If you need to update, you can also, so it gives you the options. You can go to the IRS website. You can call the 800 number. This is if you wanted to submit correspondence, not necessarily a tax payment. I also noticed something interesting. This probably would not happen to your notice, but this is an example. So here the notice date is January 31st, 2017. Here it's January 8th. If I received a notice with this kind of a mistake, I would at least call to clarify the date of the notice, or I would automatically assume that the notice date is officially the earlier of the two. Now, you could contact the IRS to clear that up, and that would be a valid reason to do so. So in this section, we're breaking down the penalties. In this case, this was a penalty that's 2 months late for a failure to file Form 941. Here's the penalty rate that was assessed based on that, and then the penalty amount that was calculated. And then the failure to pay penalty. So this is normally 5% per month or a part of a month. But when it's combined with a failure to pay, then you'll see the failure to pay penalty is 0.5%. So the 5% minus the 0.5 equals 4.5%. So in other words, they're kind of cumulative in that, the total penalty rate, if both of those penalties apply, does not exceed 5% per month. You can request a removal or reduction of penalties. There's a couple of things that you may want to know. So if this is your first time ever encountering tax issues, there's the IRS has what's known as a first-time abate program where you can request abatement simply because it's your first time. If it's not your first time, but you do have reasonable cause, then you can request an abatement based on reasonable cause. Also, if you requested written advice from the IRS and you gave them a written question on a specific issue, you gave them enough information and it was accurate so that they could give you accurate advice, you received advice that you relied upon, and then you turn around and find out that you have a penalty based on that advice, that would be an example of a reason why you would file your request for abatement. And you do that on IRS Form 843. Below this, we have the periods where interest is calculated. Usually interest rates are assigned on a quarterly basis. So for example, this quarter, the last quarter of 2008, it was 6%. And then the first quarter of 2009, it was lowered to 5%. And then for the rest of 2009 through all of 2010, it went down to 4%. Then it was down to 3%. Then it was raised back up to 4%. So those changes happen on a quarterly basis. So there's additional information. There's not a whole lot on this page, but you can call, you can go online. You can also click this link. So this is one key difference between the IRS notice CP160 is that page was broken. And this page actually works. So it does give you a breakdown of what you need to do. You can also appoint someone to represent you in dealings with the IRS on the power of attorney form known as IRS Form 2848. I'll put a link in the show notes to the resources about that. And then there's some more frequently asked questions as well as links to resources on the IRS website. So I think that covers everything that I had planned to discuss about IRS Form 9 or CP Notice 161 concerning IRS Form 941. So, we'll put links in the show notes to the articles and the videos that we've created about these forms. So if you like our articles, please subscribe to our newsletter. If you like our YouTube videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have any questions or comments, or if there's another topic that you'd like to see covered in an upcoming video, please hit me up in the comments section. Thank you very much and have a great day.